Welcome, welcome. I am so thrilled to be here. This is the first episode of the Healing Haven podcast, and I am here with my dear friend and IFS expert, Autumn Starks. So let me read your impressive bio before we jump in and start to hear about you as a human. Autumn Starks is the founding therapist and CEO of Starks Therapy Group. She is a licensed clinical social worker and has been practicing for over 15 years. Autumn is a certified internal family systems therapist. She uses IFS to support clients healing from trauma, depression, and anxiety. She specializes in working with religious trauma, neurodiverse, and queer identities discovered in adulthood, and therapy through a justice and equity lens, which we love. Her other areas of expertise include psychedelic therapy, ketamine therapy, work around body neutrality, health at every size, integration of altered state experiences, that's another podcast, and therapy for other therapists. Autumn, welcome.
Hey, I was not fully conscious that this is the first one.
The first one.
What?
Yeah, so fun. I'm so glad you're here. And, Autumn and I were just saying before we started that I really don't know very much. I took one half-a-day training a million years ago on IFS, but it's no surprise to you, IFS is like the therapy modality. All the celebrities in therapy are using IFS therapy. IFS is hot, so I'm really happy that you're here because it's so helpful, right?
It's so helpful. I'm so grateful that the culture is ready for it.
Yes.
I started my IFS training as a baby therapist in community mental health, a social worker, right? Social workers don't get trained super sufficiently in therapy unless they really go out and find it. And this was like 10 years ago. And then you'd start to talk to people about it and your parts and the self, and we'll get into that. And they would just look at you like you've grown a second head. And you were like the weird kid on the block who wanted to close their eyes and go inside and talk to themselves. And now it's everywhere. And so it's so nice to be sought out for it instead of being
Yeah.
I share this weird little niche thing with you that I'm so excited about.
Right. Constantly trying to convince other people that it's super valid, super helpful, really amazing, fascinating, cool.
No, the research is good. I know it's weird.
Oh, that's so great. I love that. I love that for you, and I really love that for the world. Before we get into IFS, can you tell us a little bit about you as a human being, and how you got into the world of psychology and becoming a therapist?
Totally. I always joke that I was like that kid in kindergarten that was helping your little table mates share the red crayon, like the shiny new red crayon. And so that is I feel like I've always been super relationally curious and oriented, trying to figure people out. Also, as a neurodiverse person, knowing that now, it's oh, I was working hard to figure everybody out.
You
But
bet.
at the time, the script about me was Autumn is just so friendly. Autumn gets along with everybody. Autumn helps other people get along. So as I went through adolescence, there are some really awesome adults in my life that are you could really do this. You could really help people, talk with them and be helpful for them. I also am somebody who spent some of my younger years in pretty grounded religious tradition around helping your neighbor, serving the poor. I was one of those nerdy Christian kids who read the Bible and was Jesus talks more about poor people and not getting too much money than he does any of these other things. And so that sent me to social work school, where that wasn't to say, but I learned a lot about the world outside of my little bubble. And so that's how I sort of launched into this world of therapy, inner work, relationships, systems oriented thinking. And IFS is so cool because it's about the system within. It's this merging of systems thinking and inner conversational work, experiential work. So I was really lucky early in my career. A family friend was you should learn about this model. I know it's so weird. And it was just such a good fit for me to get true in-depth therapy training as a baby social work therapist.
Yeah. So when did Dick Schwartz, I believe, is the guy, the founder of IFS, So he put it out, I mean, a long time ago. Like you were at the front lines of this.
In a way, yeah. I'm in some consultation groups with people who were like literally in the room where it happened, like
Wow.
in those first consultation meetings, and that would have been like in the early 90s.
Okay.
And I came to my first IFS training. It was one of the first maybe 100 trainings, I think, but it
Wow.
would have been like 2010, one of the first formalized trainings of the system that they do now. But
Totally.
it was very much a collaborative effort from him and the people around him. And it's so cool. He was here in Chicago at the time, and so there's a lot of therapists around
Oh,
in this area where we are that have been doing it for twice as long as I have, which is always awesome to have depth to learn from.
for sure. Absolutely. But you are an IFS expert.
That is
So
true. I have the highest level of IFS training available.
yes, you do. So if you could start like high level,
Mhm.
I think you mentioned what the acronym stands for, but if we could say that again and just like kind of like slowly filter our way down to give people a really broad understanding of what it is and how people can apply it to their everyday lives
Yes,
without
yes.
necessarily having to be in a therapeutic relationship. Both things are true, but
Let's totally do that. Okay, so IFS. It stands for Internal Family Systems Therapy, IFS, and it's very commonly just called parts work. When somebody says parts work, they might be talking about IFS, they might be talking about something sort of like that. So you can always ask those questions. Um, but the reason that word parts work fits is because we just all talk this way, right? We're like, she broke up with me and I want her to call me and I want to go key her car, right? Like, I want her to call me back and tell me that she loves me again. And part of me wants to go puncture her tires. We are always feeling mixed up inside. We're
you
always
bet.
inner conflict. And in our culture, we think that multiplicity, I'm going to use a fancy word, multiplicity of the mind, which just means having a multifaceted mind, is a sign of illness. That's what we have taught. We think about things like multiple personality disorders or that like dual language has a really negative connotation in our culture. And IFS sort of breaks onto the scene and is like, multiplicity of the mind is normal and healthy. It's good. We all have it. We all already talk this way. We all already feel inner conflict. Let's just like really believe ourselves and take it a little bit further. So the way that, right? Like it's like,
What you said is profound. I'm sorry to interrupt. I told you I was going to do that a lot. That is
oh
just so
yeah.
profound because it just occurred to me that just by IFS existing and
Mhm.
people talking about it in the way that you just did is deconstruction work.
It is.
And what I mean when I say deconstruction work, I know you know, but it's starting to interrogate what
Mhm.
we've been taught, where it came from, who does it benefit. Like it's collective liberation work is really what it is at the epicenter of it.
Yes, yes. Well, and like just a little nerdy aside, like I'm no longer that nerdy Christian girl. I'm no longer religious. I work in religious trauma, but I can tell you where that idea comes from. It comes from the Judeo-Christian background of like God is of one mind. That is the belief that we have all baked in, whether or not we grew up in a religious family or community. Our culture harkens back to text that's like, it is only healthy to be of one mind. And so we put this pressure on others to like, well, she doesn't even know her own mind. She doesn't even know what she wants. And we
Mm-hmm.
elevate in our culture these people who appear on social media to be of one mind. And our little like, oh, that's healthy ego strength like goes for them. Okay. Okay. So back out of that. I think it's so interesting to know why we think we're broken because we can deconstruct it.
That's
So
right.
IFS breaks onto the scene and says, no, 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 nope. You have many parts of you. You might have 9, you might have 99, you might never know how many you have, and that is normal. The mark of health is how well you can listen to yourself, care for your parts, understand where they're coming from, and whether or not you're able to access this thing that we all have called self. So I think it's easier to describe parts first, and then I'll describe self.
Okay, sounds good.
In IFS, we talk about parts serving different roles. We use like these
I'm
terms
going to
sort
interrupt you again. So with parts, I think I know this, but I want to interrupt for people who might be super new to therapy or mental health stuff.
of,
Parts is is like a different way of saying like my different thoughts, right?
Mhm,
So the example you gave with like the ex-partner
mhm,
is like there's a part of me that misses her. There's a part of me that like
mhm.
wants to slash her tires. Those are just different thoughts you're having, right?
Yeah, they're different thoughts, and they can also be and are more than thoughts. I think
Okay.
in our society, thoughts is a really quick and good way in. They can also be patterns of body sensation and movement. They can be emotions. Some people, if they close their eyes and go inside using their active imagination, they can begin to see parts of themselves. Some people never do that. Some people hear their parts and what they say in their head, like a thought would be. Um, and what we do is when we get really curious about our thoughts and move toward them instead of push them away, we let them flesh out. I'm going to use the word sub-personalities. I mean that in the least stigmatizing way possible. I
Totally.
just like
This
a
is not
little,
DID we are talking about.
you're not talking about DID. I'm saying everybody has DID, and the level to which you can get to know all of your parts and they can collaborate is a sign of health. I don't mean literally everyone has DID, but
No, but I think that's a really helpful way to think about it. Again, the more times we can say it is
mhm.
normal to have a bunch of different parts who are often not on the same page or have different thoughts and feelings, like that's helpful for everybody to really deeply understand.
Yes, yes. And so we usually figure out for us what's the fastest way we can clock a part has taken over. Is it a big emotion? Is it an uncomfortable physical sensation? Is it a thought that keeps coming up again and again? And when we feel our way toward that, we ask it to get bigger, we ask it to take up a little bit more space while we're maintaining our curiosity, a sense of self. So we in IFS, we have parts and we have self. Parts aren't bad. We're not trying to get rid of parts. There's a phrase that says all parts are welcome. We really truly mean it. But the way in which it's like family therapy is that our parts are often young, they're often childlike, they're often rigid, they're often stuck in roles that no longer work for them. And they're awaiting a force, an inner force, not an external savior to come and get them, an inner force, an inner parent to come and hold the space for them, to have them have room to share their fears, have them have room to share the experiences that they've been holding for us outside of our conscious mind, sometimes in our conscious mind. And so IFS believes that in addition to having parts, we all have a core self. That core self is curious, it's compassionate, it brings a sense of clarity, it brings
Mm,
sometimes a sense of inner knowing or conviction,
mm.
bring creativity in many other elements. And so what we're doing in IFS is we're finding a part, we're checking in, how do I feel toward that part? So we're saying like, um, I have a part up right now, my manager part that wants to make sure I explain this all clearly.
Oh, I love this example, Autumn.
And I'm like, okay, Autumn, how do I feel toward that part? I have one part that's like, ugh, that girl, she is always thinking she is in charge. Why can't you just like let that go and be more self, have more self present here in this conversation? That's what it's like, sort of an inner hippie, right? Everybody just needs an experience of your self energy, Autumn, and then you could heal the world. So I'm like, okay, ask that part to step back. How else do I feel toward that part? Well, of course, I'm needing her to help language these concepts, and I'm so grateful. And so then that part can exist, and my gratitude, my compassion, my self energy can coexist with this part so that this part doesn't have to do it alone. She doesn't have to get it perfectly, but she's supported in her role. We don't get rid of her, we support her in her role and let her do what she's really, really good at.
Apps. Oh my God, I love that. And what a metaphor. I mean, this could go so many, I won't derail us, but like what a metaphor for the world, especially at this point in time, right? Like we need everybody and we need to understand everyone so that we can move forward together. And that's what I'm hearing you say about our own intrapersonal experience as well.
Right. When
Yeah.
we develop the capacity for inner compassion, we naturally develop capacity for outer compassion.
Woo!
And
Say that again, girl.
okay, so when we develop a capacity for inner compassion, inner understanding, even inner clarity, we can't help but start to begin to apply that to the people around us. We can't help but see them more clearly, not, making up their mind for them, but just room. When we have room for ourselves, we can have room for other people. And systems, all systems are nested systems.
Yes!
So we've got my system and Colleen's
I'm getting
system.
hot over here, Autumn.
Let's do it. And like together we create a system and different elements of our system. And then if we were with our wider circle of friends, that's a bigger system. And that system exists in the therapist community or in the regional community that we're in, and on and on.
I love that so much. So it's, so much of my work as a trauma therapist is about the nervous system, right? Which we think of as fight or flight all the time, which is what so much of us in the world is constantly in. And this is using a different way of the nervous system, which is tend and befriend. And that's what IFS really is. It's saying instead of being at war with your parts, like, let's get to know them. Let's be curious about them. Let's be grateful for them and have compassion for how they got the role that they did, so that we can move forward together more cohesively with more peace and purpose.
Yeah. So let me give you like an outline on how most parts are oriented. Everybody's system is a little different, but we all have three different types of parts. The first one that's good to talk about, we call them exiles. They're usually young children parts that hold things like fear, emotional pain, shame, fear of abandonment, and they are the thing that you feel when your buttons get pushed and you're like suddenly crying and can't stop. Or they're that when you're in that meeting with your boss and you're like feeling shame because you did something wrong and you're like, no, don't feel that. The thing that you're trying to not feel is an exile. That's why we call it that. Our other parts are really hard to push them as far out of the system as they can get them. The other two types of parts are protector parts. One we call managers. They're the ones that help us day to day to try to manage our life tasks and to try to preemptively get away from those really strong and overwhelming feelings. Managers work really hard and sometimes they fail. When exile energy gets out and self isn't around because we haven't cultivated these skills, the third type of part comes in. We call them firefighters. They come in, they crash through the system, and they just do whatever needs to be done to shut down the overwhelming feeling that exiles give us. So nervous system, it can be hyper or hypoarousal.
Yeah.
It can be substance use. It can be impulsively shopping on Cyber Monday. It can be anger and yelling. It can be sleeping too much. Often something body-based, but we can also have extreme patterns of mental thought that get us out of that exile energy. Everybody has exiles, managers, firefighters, and self, and we're all arranged differently. The thinking is that when we're young, we go through stressful things, and we all have a self even when we're young, but our ability to call on self energy is less within our control for developmental reasons. And so when hard shit happens to us, an exile takes it on and takes on a belief about itself. That happened to me because I'm bad and everyone will leave me. That is too overwhelming. And so as the child ages, they are like, well, I know how to make people not leave me. Let me. And thus a manager is calcified into that role. Or the toddler screaming because they didn't get their milk. Thus, a firefighter has taken on a new role. And parts keep doing the roles that work or that worked really well in a high stress situation.
That's what I feel like so many people, myself included, struggle with, is like, we're not doing things because we're crazy. We're doing things because once upon a time they made fucking sense. Or they were the only choice we had, right? And so we don't give ourselves enough grace, enough compassion, And then, of course, what we don't offer ourselves, we don't offer other people. But it's like
Mm-hmm.
we only do things as human beings that at one point in our life, it made sense. It helped us survive. And the
Mm-hmm.
things that we do when we're trying to survive are really hard to let go of, understandably so.
Right. And it takes real work. We like to say, like, when you know better, you do better, but that's not exactly true. It's like when you know better and then you have the time and space and capacity to go and update those parts of you that might not know better yet.
That's
That's
it.
the inner capacity to do better. And that is real experiential work that can be done in a therapist's office, and much of it can be done in your journal during your meditation,
That's
reading
it.
parts.
That's it, Autumn. Like, there's only so, right? Like, you can go to therapy and have someone help you with this work, and,
Mm-hmm.
or there's so much work that you can and need to be doing outside of the therapy office, because you're right, it's not just about knowing, it's about then letting it filter down and get embodied, which
Mm-hmm.
requires practice.
It requires practice and reorientation and remembering to remember that we're wired this way and remembering to let ourselves experience the relief of that, like, when you do that thing that you're like so embarrassed about later and you feel like, oh my gosh, I am that thing I did. This
Yes.
is so powerful because a part of you did that. If it wasn't just a part of you, you wouldn't dislike it. So you would be all on board with that thing that you did that you don't like. It's just a part of you. And it's so incredibly destigmatizing for the mental health space, but just for everyone, instead of being like, ugh, I'm such a perfectionist.
Mm.
No, I have a perfectionistic part. Or, oh my gosh, I'm out of control with sugar. I mean, I don't like to moralize food, right? But in our society, like, I'm out of control with food. No, like, you have a part that's using food to try to soothe something deeper. And this is
Mm-hmm.
one of the most beautiful things about IFS is it just gives us a system that we can get traction in on how to do deep inner work. It like creates one formula that you can use that has steps, that has a language, that has like a worldview around it. Because whenever people are talking about like inner work, like, what are they really talking about? Well, I
Totally.
can tell you, I can hand you the book with the script of what I'm talking about when I talk about IFS.
And just how liberating even that one piece is when you experience shame or embarrassment or guilt or whatever, you get to say, your capital S self gets to be like, no, honey, that was just a part of you.
Mm-hmm.
What do we need to do to feel better about that? What do we need to do internally? What do we need to do out in the world or in a relationship? How can we be accountable for ourselves, for our behavior, for everything? This is like beautiful, compassionate accountability in a way that completely takes shame, has
Mm-hmm.
the possibility for completely taking shame out of the game, which is
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. Or to like move toward the shame.
Oh, look at, I love, yes,
Yeah, yeah.
right.
Include the shame, get to know why it's there. There's a process in IFS called unburdening where you get to know the part that's holding the shame. One way of seeing parts is that they're containers, especially exiles. And we can go through a very real process of letting parts let go of the thing that they've been carrying for us, that our current life no longer requires us to carry. There's a really real system, which we won't do today, but I'm curious if you're ready. I feel like we should show them.
Yeah, let's go.
Should we show them? Okay.
Totally.
Um, so before we got on this call, I asked Colleen to think about a place that she felt stuck, that she'd feel comfortable like dabbling around in front of you all with today. And I'm curious what you chose.
I completely forgot to think about it, but
That's
here,
okay.
let's go.
That's okay.
But
It
I
could be
mean,
literally anything. And
I
at any point you can be like, oh, I know what that is, and I don't want to talk about it anymore.
there's always a plethora of shit to choose from. So yeah, let's go.
Okay, so give me an example from the last week or two where you did or said something, and then 1 minute later we're like, ugh, I did it again.
Yeah, for sure. Parenting is a really easy place for me to go with this.
Yeah. Same.
Trying to think about how to protect my kids' privacy. So one of my kids is having some major insomnia. And they then get sleep anxiety around bedtime because they're worried they're going to have insomnia again. And I'm always like, I'm socials being like, feel your feelings. I'm always telling myself, oh my God, I got to feel my feelings. And then my kid is scared and I'm like, let's not focus on the fear, you know?
You were in this place where you were talking them out of their feelings instead of doing the thing that you have a value for.
You bet.
And then later, when did you notice that you had done that?
Oh, 5 minutes later, I was sitting on the couch being like, I just messed that one up.
Okay, yeah. So you've got the part of you that in that moment of stress for you defaulted to talking somebody out of something. That's like an example of a manager. And then the critic came in. Oh, that's not who we want to be. I can't believe we did that. In this moment, which of those energies, sensations, thoughts feels most present?
What are the two options again?
It's okay, good. The part that just jumped in and talked them out of it, or the feeling of like, ugh, I did it again. I talked them out of it when that's not my value.
I'm a bad volunteer. I'm going to say if I'm being really honest, the part that I'm most familiar with is like a compassionate part, which I probably am screwing up the example.
Okay, so say more about the compassionate part.
I'm just like, I was fucking tired and it had been a really long night and I don't have to be perfect.
Yep.
There is a fear part that immediately wants to talk back.
That says what?
That's like, they're going to think it's so ridiculous to say it out loud.
Yeah.
They're going to think about this moment for the rest of their lives. Like, you have just now made like sleeping extra stressful because now they're not allowed to be fearful or express their fear to you. And if they can't express their feelings to you, who the fuck can they express their feelings? I could go on and on.
You could go on and on. Okay. So as you know you've got a part that's got a script around compassion. This is a very in the weeds thing about IFS. There can be self and there can be self-like parts. And because you just called it a part, that makes me want to think this is like a part that knows how you're supposed to feel. You're supposed to be compassionate.
That's probably right.
And it's good. All of these parts are good. I'm not like them.
No,
but the one that immediately took in, it was this fear. Like there was an energy toward it. So take a moment and just let that part take up some space. You can close your eyes if you want to.
The fearful part?
Fearful part, the one that's like if they can't come to you, who can they come to? This is going to have a lasting impact on my kids.
Oof.
And just let it take up some space. I'm curious if you feel it in your body.
Immediately.
Yeah, where do you feel it in your body?
Ooh, I feel tearful. There's a buzzing feeling in my chest. Yeah, immediately.
Yeah. Do you get a mental image of the part, or is it more visceral sensation?
More visceral, but when you prompt me for visual, it's like it's my angry perfectionistic self. It's my stress lines. You know, it's the finger, it's the accusation.
So I want you to breathe toward that part of you, breathe into that part of your body as with the intention of letting that part know that you see it and that you feel it and that you're here too.
Yeah.
And as you do that, I just want you to check in and ask yourself, how do I feel toward this part?
Scared. I feel scared of it. I don't want to like draw its attention or focus.
Totally. So that's a part. Scared is a part. Ask that scared part if it's willing to give you some space to just be with the anger. We're not going to let the anger drive from here on out, but we want to know the anger. And just see if the scared will take a little step back, and you can come back to it later. Yeah, okay. Thank it for doing that, for trusting you. And then turn your attention again back toward the anger and see how you feel toward it now. No wrong answers, only truthful ones.
I mean, my first image was of like my angry face softening and being like, I'm just scared too. Like I'm just really scared too.
Yeah. Immediately you got a message from the scared part or from the angry part that's like, saw the scared, saw it take a step back. You yourself tried to tap in. And then the angry part was like, yeah, I'm scared too. I'm doing this because of fear. So as you know that about the anger and you receive that, how do you feel toward the angry, scared 11 lines?
11 lines. That's great. That's exactly what it is. I'm like gearing up for this. I was like, dear God. Okay. Focus.
Yep.
I mean, I immediately can have more compassion because I know it's the part of, it's a very familiar part, and it's the part that wants me to be the best mom imaginable and the best wife imaginable and the best friend it's like it's the part that wants me to show up in love in the best ways possible so nobody fucking leaves me or hates me. Autumn. Woo!
Yeah, and there's other parts there that it's protecting. This is clearly a protector part. It shows up in anger. It gives you energy. Anger almost always gives us some access to energy, even temporary, because there are other parts of you that are afraid that you won't do a good enough job and people will leave you, or you'll do damage to the people that you love. This part is scared of that. And so I think that you can see how, if we pause this exercise here, how by doing this process of sorting out several of the parts that are here, picking one, focusing on it, and getting even just a glimpse of that self to part connection, the part softens, and our ability to have insight, there's room for the ability to have insight. Now, you could take this and work with it on your own or with an IFS therapist, whatever people feel whatever's most accessible to them, honestly.
Yeah.
You could map this all out. You could draw it out. You could move through it. You could spend some time focused more. I wonder if I could find those parts of me that are afraid that the people around me are going to leave me. You could hear their stories. And you can do it from a place of learning what it's like when you do this in self energy. So I used words to describe the concept of self energy. I think in this moment, it might be helpful for me to describe the feeling in the body of self energy.
That's exactly what I would love to hear more about, because what just came to me as you were talking through that is like such loving curiosity, which is often not how we approach ourselves or others typically.
Just now, when you had glimpses of spaciousness, what did it feel like?
It felt illuminating. I felt curious. I felt excited. Now I'll be curious to do this. I'm a psychologist who's been in therapy for 20 years, right? So I want to make sure, looking at the time, I want to make sure we get to how people can do this who maybe are new awareness space. But yeah, I felt excited, the quickness of it. I'm an ADHDer. I'm all about efficiency, right? So like it was just so quick. I could access things really quickly, and that feels exciting.
Oh, good. Yeah. I really resonate with a lot of what you're saying. When I'm talking to a brand new client who's not a therapist or a psychologist about this, I often start with the conversation of what are times in your life that you felt most yourself. I don't necessarily mean in
Mm.
any way, although that can be true, but also like you belonged in the moment you were in, or you felt flow, or you felt connected. Sometimes, and these are moments where you feel maybe like 80 or 90% self energy. To do this work, you only need like 5%. You don't need to be at 90% all the time. But by talking about 90%, we can get a sense for these more subtle feelings of 5 or
Love
10.
that.
And so the big 90 percenters examples I often use, I work a lot with women who have had children. So it's like the birth of your first child. What a big feeling, right? You're not going to feel that way all the time doing inner work. Many people have had an experience of like deep connection to beauty and awe. Others might connect with a moment they were surprised or overwhelmed by something beautiful in nature. It could be a big thing, a mountain, or it could be like you're driving over the overpass and it's like an October sunset in Chicago and you're like, gorgeous, she's gorgeous. And you just feel that like rightness with it.
Mm-hmm.
Other people, they feel this feeling more in activity. So maybe it's like they're playing their sport and like they can't miss. They get into that sense of like their body just knows the next way to move. Others might feel it from a spiritual practice. There can be tingling, flow, time slows a little bit or speeds up a little bit. And if you don't know how to feel it, a trick I use with almost everybody is I want you to breathe toward it.
Love
Use
that.
your breath to like your breath is a natural connection that we all have to self energy. And I know breath can be triggering for people with trauma. Tread lightly, trust yourself. But if you're in a calm state, directing your breath toward whatever you're feeling is a way to start to get glimpses and cultivate this felt sense in your body so that you can be like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it from a place of self energy? Well, if you're thinking that, that's probably a part.
Right.
And like, it's also okay to do some of this work from parts that are curious. Curiosity is
Right.
so helpful.
Curiosity is huge. Let me just jump in for a second. All this talk about like love, joy, a sense of awe, a sense of flow.
Mhm.
You're talking about all of these things to describe what capital S self feels
Yes,
like. Yeah.
that's right.
I just wanted to like make that really clear for our audience that like the part that's able to be curious, to have compassion, to experience love,
Mhm.
that's capital S self energy. Am I getting that right?
Yes. And so the whole idea is that can be the leader inside you. You don't have to be in self energy all the time. We're not getting rid of our parts.
Right.
And reliably access a portion of our self energy, all the work with our parts can become easier, more spacious, more collaborative, less stuck, less emotionally painful, less stressful.
Yeah.
And so the IFS Institute used to be called the Center for Self Leadership.
Cool. Oh my God, I didn't know that. And I love that.
Yeah, that's really what we're aiming for is self big S self leadership. Um, so yes, let's get into like how people can do this because I think there's a good connection point here.
Can
There's
I say one
yes,
thing really quick? Um, I love the self-leadership concept so much because what I hear when you say that is like we are radically accountable for ourselves, right?
that's
And
right.
and I think so many of us are walking around feeling broken, feeling like something's wrong
Mhm,
with us. So we're looking to things, we're looking to people, we're looking to places, we're looking for activities, we're looking for shit to fill our holes,
mhm,
as opposed, which is, spoiler alert, like doesn't work ever
mhm.
for infinity. So it's really turning it back around and being like, I already have everything I need. I already am whole
Yes.
and I can go inside to do that work, not
Mhm,
out in the world to like
mhm.
patch up holes in myself, right? Like it's radical accountability,
Mhm.
which of course we want to do in community. We do
Of
not
course.
want to be like Western bootstrappy kind of shit, but I love that because that just feels so empowering to me, you know?
Yes, it's so important to get our heads around that we have a strength, a resource that lives inside of us.
That's
It's
right.
not only inside of us, it also exists around us, but there's a way in which we can tap into an inner strength, an inner knower, an inner healer, an inner leader.
Yes.
And what I am trying to do as an IFS therapist is work myself out of a job. I want my clients to orient themselves and have enough autonomy and self-understanding in this space that they no longer require, every time an issue comes up, for me to guide and hold the space for them toward themselves, that they begin to develop a practice that they can do on their own 90% of the time. And then maybe life gets overwhelming, or maybe they find a stuck point and it's a really reactive place inside of them, and they would benefit from coming back in for 3 therapy sessions to target that. And because there is power in holding space for one another and the collective, and there can be ease there, but I am not in charge of their healing.
That's right.
Their inner knowing will set the pace for their healing. And you might be listening to me talk and be like, I have never felt that way in my life, Autumn. Well, you know what? Like, I love you, and you're not that special. You are not the one person in the universe that does not have a self. And I know we operate in our world and we look at people around us and people empower, and we're like, they have a self. And I'm like, I believe that they do. It can be covered over. It can be exiled too, just like exiles, but it's not there.
That's right. I love that so much. Right. Radical accountability, empowerment of self-leadership. Right.
Mhm.
So, okay.
Yes.
I wanted to get to that, but now I would love for all of us to be able to walk away to be like, okay, I want to do this. I want to do this for me, literally. I want our audience to be able to do this for themselves. So when you say, we can continue to work with my example if that's helpful.
For
But
sure.
when you say like map it out, and not just maybe in my head for those folks where it feels like a little too heady, what would that look like?
Yeah, when I'm guiding somebody in therapy or sometimes with myself, I'm literally writing it down on a piece of paper.
Okay.
So I'm taking that first part. Man, I got into my narrator and talked my kiddo out of their fear. I'm writing that down. Talked kiddo out of fear, talking part. And then I'm looking at the paper and I'm saying, how do I feel toward that part? And every feeling reaction I have, I'm feeling like, ugh, I did it again. I'm feeling like, it's okay, Colleen, give yourself some more time and space. And feeling like, and then we got to the fear somehow, or the anger somehow, and then there's the scared part that popped up. I am writing it down, and as a therapist for you, I'd be putting it in front of me, and for myself, I also use that to help myself anchor. What was I thinking about again? What was I doing? Because the world is full of rabbit trails, or we actually call them trailheads of future work you could do, but writing it down is really grounding. So I think that that's one thing that people can do. They can pick a medium stressful event, not the most stressful thing that's ever happened to you.
That's an important point. That feels like
cool. Don't start there. Start at like a 4 out of 10 stressful event.
Love that.
And start to map out your multiple reactions and see if you can stay in a curious headspace about it.
And then, okay, so let's say I've got all these different parts written down. And for me, they're thoughts on a piece of paper representing parts, right? Like, God damn it, you did it again, whatever. Then do I like pick one of those? And I'm like, well, what kind of questions would I ask it? Or like, what would it, like, how would I go deeper with that, like one part or one thought?
Yeah. So I think that this is where like a more structured resource that's accessible is helpful for people. So I'm a nerd, and this won't be for everybody, but if you're like in this, you're like, I've got to do this and I'm ready to do it today, go onto your local library and download No Bad Parts. It's an audiobook that Dick Schwartz made, and he will actually have even more robust like explanations of all of this, and then meditations that you can do with him in that book to guide you through live with yourself in your room of processes you can do. But to spell them out here briefly, I'll say you pick a target part, you ask yourself, how do you feel toward that part? As
Just
long
like
as
you did
it's
with
not
me.
curiosity and compassion, we just assume it's a part. We see if it'll give us some space. If it will, we come back. If it won't, it becomes the new target part and you start again. How do I feel toward that part? Until you can map it out and get into that curious place. Once you've got that curiosity on board, the next question is really trippy. How does this part feel toward me? Does this part
Whoa.
here? Does this part know who I am?
I love that question. Does this part know who I am?
Yeah.
Cool.
Start to develop, it's not just a self to part connection, it's a part to self connection, and we're building inner trust. So once we have that established, and in that moment, even talking about it, I can feel the self energy. I feel self energy sometimes it's like face goosebumps for myself. Once you have that, like, I'm in a place of loving compassion and curiosity, and this part is feeling safe with me, you can begin to ask it some questions. You can use some structured questions like from the book, and you can also follow your own inner wisdom. You can say, can you tell me more about how you came to believe that you needed to act this way to keep the people around you committed to you? Can you tell me the first time you learned that this is how you needed to act? So you start to do it can be trauma work, it can be memory work, and it can just be maybe a part just gives you a general sense of the time of your life that it got stuck here. And then you can start to develop as it shares, it often starts to lighten its load. And you can ask it, like, would you like to do this differently? Do you need,
Mm-hmm.
and something I'm always closing sessions with is like, is there anything else part that you need from me or the client right now to continue to feel connected and supported? And
Oh,
and asking parts what they need from us, just like there are children who we do have capacity for in that moment. What are you needing right now to know, to like to feel okay in this world that you're in? And then there are other more specific like trauma healing steps that can be done and can be learned about and can be done sometimes safely on your own. Sometimes that's where you want to do the thing and do a brief stint of therapy. I don't want to mislead people or lead people into deep work that wouldn't be safe for them to do alone.
yeah.
But once you have this part to self connection, self will know, oh, yep, I'm that
Too
not
big.
too big, and I need somebody to sit with me while I do this. Um, and so I think that's like the deepest way we can take it on our own. You may not be ready for that, and so another way to dabble would be to just begin to notice when you're talking in this way already and to add to it. So like, oh my gosh, I was late getting that project into work, and part of me like feels like so anxious that I'm going to get fired, and part of me is so mad because my boss gives me like the most unrealistic deadlines. Just to, oh, there are two parts of me. I wonder who they are. I wonder how they feel.
I
I wonder if
love
there are
that
any
so
other.
much.
And so begin to just let this idea take up room in your brain. And I think the other cool thing people could do is they could share this with a friend, send it to them, and like that they think would be into it, and they can start to have these conversations together. Like, you know, we've had this conversation now, Colleen, and so next time we're together, and if you're like, and then there was a part of me that was like this and a part of me like that, I know how to listen to that. And you'll start hearing me say it way more after this conversation.
I already hear my own thoughts being like, oh my God, I'm trying to exhale that part rather than be curious about it.
Yes.
It's like a whole perspective shift.
It's a worldview.
It really is. Wow.
Yeah.
This is incredible. I'm so grateful, like selfishly, that you and I had this conversation. And I love this. I love this for our audience because it does so many things. It normalizes things that we've been conditioned to think are crazy. It normalizes talking about mental health things with other people. Like we don't all have to sit in our silos suffering by ourselves thinking we're crazy. We
Right.
can share this with a friend. We can start having these conversations with other people. Because guess what? We're all fucking struggling. Every single person. No one has their shit together. Spoiler alert. Like
No one.
literally no one.
No one. And like, not even your IFS therapist. You know,
That's right. Not even your IFS therapist. Not your therapist, period.
Not your therapist even. And so yeah, there's of course power in that and having people hold that space for you. But I really believe in our society, like therapy is filling a spiritual and relational hole that can be filled in other ways.
Yes. All day that, Autumn.
Yeah, and so we can cultivate and become people who can truly hold space for ourselves and for others. And we don't have to be therapists to be doing that work. And then we're all smart and caring. Like we'll know when we're treading in something where you need a true expert. Sure, these things exist.
Yep.
But like when we can work in this way, we can work with humility because we get to be who we are and we don't have to know it all.
Oh, oh, it's so liberating. It's so empowering. I love it.
Awesome.
It feels like the perfect place to end. Thank you so much for being here. If people want to learn more about you and the work that you're doing, where can they find you?
You can find us online. I lead Stark's Therapy Group, which is a small group practice here in Oak Park, Illinois. And we see clients here in Illinois. But you can also join our website, our mailing list on our website, follow us on Instagram at Stark's Therapy Group. This conversation is like, I should be talking more about this. People need, it's like putting the fire in me. So thanks, Colleen, for that. Follow us there at Stark's Therapy Group. And you'll also see other like podcasts and things that I've done about this, about ketamine, about that kind of thing, if you want to learn more from me.
Yep, and how they all work together.
They're all kind of one thing, it turns out.
They really are. Yeah, so we'll definitely have you back on for ketamine, for integration, for neuroqueer stuff, maybe. Yeah, all sorts of fun things spinning around in my head.
Totally.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Autumn.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.